Okay, so this is the Colorado River. You would probably say it slightly differently if you spoke Spanish, Colorado. Um, but Colorado is typical for English. Um, you're right about lifeblood. Lifeblood implies that without this river and the water flowing through it, that region would not survive. It's a very old-fashioned idea that, bodies might bleed, but that they also have lifeblood. That is, if they have a they have blood deep within them, that is the condition of their survival. So if you saw someone's lifeblood spilling out of a wound, you would assume that it was a very serious wound. And I think it's often used to refer to like arterial bleeding, like that really heavy blood loss. But it is a very old-fashioned word. It's not used that often. And here it's being used as a metaphor. So they're saying that the river or the river's water and all of the things that depend on that river are really fundamental to the environment in that region. Um, Partly down to the fact. So for something to be down to the fact, um, it's explained by this. It's due to this. So it's partly due to people taking too much water. Um, Down to the fact is kind of an idiomatic phrase. So nothing else can really work here. We use just this phrase, down to the fact, and it's very conversational. It's not a very formal phrase either. Yeah, so you could put a cause of any kind in there. Um, but it would be unusual to not have the first one down to the fact, partly down to this, down to the fact that this, and partly down to this other thing. So if you just use the expression partly down to a mega drought, it would feel very informal. In fact, it is a very informal way of saying something. It's saying it's due to something or it's caused by something. Um, yeah.
So there are
So
two options: down to the fact or down to a reason, like for example,
a
this mega
reason,
drought. Yeah.
yeah. But if you use the second option and hadn't already used the first one, it would feel weirdly out of context and it would feel um, like it's kind of setting up. It's partly down to this and it's partly down to that. Um, yeah, I don't know. I guess it could be used with any sort of reason, really. Um, the fact that doesn't need to be used here. No, I guess I revised my opinion. It's just using down to rather than due to or caused by it's just an idiomatic way of referring to the causes of things, I think, or the reasons for things. Yeah.
So it means
Um,
that it is not a real. It means
It means that it is not the real reason when you say the idiomatic. What does that mean here?
I mean that if you try to make sense of it, it it has that meaning, but it doesn't have that literal meaning.
Mm.
It's one of these weird turns of phrase that grammatically don't quite make sense.
Mm.
So saying that something is the reason for something else, that it is down to that reason, comes down to that reason, is another way it's said sometimes. It's really hard to unpick it because it doesn't really make sense. But it's like a turn of phrase that's used frequently. And these sorts of idiomatic expressions, um, they are often a sign of informal writing as well.
Mm.
So this is not a very formal text. So exacerbated is means to add intensity to something. So so we've got these two causes that people take too much water out of the river, and also that there's a mega drought, which is an extended ongoing drought, often over decades. And then there's a third extra factor that they want to add that adds intensity to all of this. So not only do people take too much water and there's a big drought, but also that's more intense than we would expect. It's exacerbated by climate change. Yeah, so the Colorado is the river.
This one.
And so this is actually introduced at the beginning of the first sentence when they talk about the Colorado River, and then they talk about the US Southwest. And then they reinforce that idea by talking about the river basin. People are taking too much water out of the river basin. So basin being like the whole catchment of the river, the whole area that the river draws water from. And so they're talking about the region that it flows through. So the US Southwest, especially the basin that the river moves through, is the driest that has been in 1200 years. So the river itself is probably affected by that.
Adam, one question. If we say which means the region the Colorado flows, if we remove through, is it correct or not?
It wouldn't be correct because it's the idea is that the river flows through this region. You could say the region in which the Colorado flows is the driest that has been in 1200 years.
Can we use another word instead of through? Flows in between of the region. I don't know. Inside of the region, whatever. In the region.
You could say flows in, but we usually think about a river flowing through the countryside rather than in the countryside. You might talk about it, the Colorado River flows across. Again, that implies that it's on the surface, whereas through implies that it's kind of in the land as well, which is more true to what's happening when a river flows usually.
So across means on the surface always.
Yeah, so you might talk about a flood water moving across a region. It implies that it's up and out of its banks, it's flowing over. I think through is most common for this sort of flowing.